So, with school starting next week, I thought I'd venture into something a little bit closer to, uh, I think, a topic that is relatable to everybody, and regardless of their walk of life, it's going to impact them. And it has a lot to do with uh, family struggles around supporting their children, supporting schools and teachers, and then how as a collective we kind of understand how the government kind of aligns with all of that by allowing for support for EAs or student aides, teacher aides in the classroom. So I'm going to align this with the story of Moses. So we'll assume we're in the sixth level of heaven. We're working towards understanding the seventh level. So like we've come a long way in civilization. We've got Abel, who's kind of coming into the world as it is. We can think of maybe kids in grade 4 or 5 or 6, and they're building healthy attachments. They're feeling really, really good about who they are as people, all the potential identities they can try to explore, experiment with, identify with, and they're really curious and almost ambitious about like, oh my gosh, there's so much I can learn about myself. And this is how they're starting their school year. Like I'm on, well, I was on Pinterest a long time ago, but with Instagram, you'll see teachers putting up different ways of decorating and crafting their classroom to kind of make it really, really inviting and colorful and bright, and sharing so much about emotional intelligence and growth mindset and what are you going to learn this year, and like all these are really, really positive vibes and energies, and it kind of gives kids that I want to be back and I'm glad that I'm back. So if we have that, then you think, okay, what comes after Moses again? You think, okay, Ibrahim was, and then you think, oh yeah, that's like family and separation and divorce and death, and then you think, okay, so if I'm not thinking about actual loss as like family members, but I have to think about loss in school, I can think of maybe friends who moved away. I can think of friendships that are maybe not as strong as they used to be last year. I can think I get an opportunity to make new friends. Maybe teachers that I thought I have are not there anymore. So there's like a little bit of loss we can kind of associate with death or like some kind of sacrifice of something that's close to our heart to kind of relate us to Ibrahim and the seventh level of heaven. And then we can think about life as in, something of an idea that was kind of forming in my mind over the summer. Kind of like you can think of yourself as like an expectant mother who's got like a project in her mind, and then you end up going to school, and then for some reason, um, as you're going through school, you find that I can't fit this project in like anything that I'm studying, and I have to find a way to learn about it and study it and talk about it, and I don't know where. So you think of like premature death somewhere, and you think, like, is there any extracurricular activities I can find where I can augment like my schoolwork with like this new idea, this budding kind of project that I want to work on? So all these ideas, you can think about how close we are to where we kind of want to be, to where Muhammad is. And he was somebody who he was an ascetic as a human, aside from being a prophet, in that he loved to spend time in contemplation. So before getting his revelation at age 40, or maybe 38, 39, 40, he spent a lot of time alone, kind of detaching from his community. Same with Ibrahim. A lot of people tend to do that. Like they'll just retreat for a little bit. Like if you watch Eat, Pray, Love, it's the same story. Ghazali was the same person who kind of, or sorry, had the same kind of life path where he just needed to take time off to almost understand with a new perspective a really big obstacle that had suddenly kind of just popped into his existence, or like into his reality. And he had to kind of draw himself back far enough to allow himself that fresh perspective on something that was like, I mean, this could be a crisis, but I'm going to try to not allow it to be one. So now I'm going to think of uh, myself as, because I have a lot of peers that I went to school with who are nurses and who are teachers. And I haven't been in touch with them, but through just being an occasional early childhood educator, I've just kind of come into contact with a lot of the ways that being a teacher is a very difficult job. Like the amount of work that goes into what they do, you have to know that they actually really love their job. And it's like just a passion within that they create. Like the classroom, the way they are, the way the classrooms end up being, as like an environment, but also the way they kind of want to facilitate learning and the different techniques that they create to support learning and kind of allow it to be almost like an independent, self-initiated endeavor that can look entertaining, and they want to make entertaining so that it's not always teacher led, but it's almost like, you know, children are playing and they're allowed to, cooperate socially and then also find a way to learn that's not going to seem like it's a chore or a task that they are sort of forced to kind of comply with. So knowing all that, you almost want to say, so like what supports do teachers have? Like we don't want to be the people who take advantage of somebody because they willingly do something. So that tends to be the case, right? I remember growing up, uh, we were kind of like an egalitarian family in the sense of like doing chores. Although most of the chores, I'm not gonna lie, I follow my mom, but we did try to kind of spread the chores evenly. So it was almost like if I can do something, I'll go ahead and do it, right? But then as we got busier and we got older, people had different responsibilities, less time spent at home. It became, well, if somebody else can do it, they'll do it. And then before you know it, someone's got like the majority of what needs to be done, and someone else is just taking for granted that it's going to get done, but it doesn't. And it's almost like, well, somebody has to start taking the initiative and volunteering and figuring out, well, what can we do to kind of support you? So that's kind of the analogy I want to align that with. So if we know that parents sometimes form meetings or kind of groups to support teachers and to support their children, and schools to fundraise to maybe augment, we want this new initiative uh, in our school, so maybe more field trips or anything like that to kind of support a learning style, then that's great. But what if we think about um, teachers who, just like from a government perspective, they might think we don't have enough teachers, teaching, what are they called? Teaching assistants or educational aides. So for children who have special needs, you might think, teachers in general might have like a really, really busy classroom and they need maybe more than one EA or a TA, right? So then you think, well, we don't want to sacrifice the learning environment for everybody, but we also want to make sure that those who need that additional support do not feel like they're always picked on or they feel like they're excluded in any way. So then you don't want to assume that, well, because it's teachers' passion, they should just put up with it. Like they should just figure out a way to do it. It could be, well, thank goodness that they want to do this and they're trying to create a new way of teaching and remaining kind of contemporary and adapting to all the different learning styles in the classroom. And then on top of that, as like a population or the society, we need to figure out a way to continue to complement that. So if you think of Moses now and you think, okay, his struggle seemed to be I have a very high ethic and I need to find a source of income that's going to align with my ethics. So I love my life. I love my job. And that I'm able to continually grow with my ethic and kind of create this concentric circle of like a society or a civilization that people enjoy living in. So then you think, okay, what is a scenario that a teacher might come across if like the government is able to support and everything's in place? And basically you would assume, okay, so what teachers uh, requests or what may be some of the difficulties that they might come across. And it might seem like sometimes if we have these kind of structures in place, like in certain institutes or institutions throughout society, that everything will be okay is okay is very tricky to kind of put your finger on because you think, well, people are just people and we'll just figure it out. But then you think, okay, but what is it about people that makes reinforcing certain ideas or political understandings sometimes tricky. Like you can say, well, they have everything that they need. Like, what is it that's a problem? And now with increasing diversity and with different suburban areas having like very, very diverse populations, it actually becomes like the population in my classroom is really diverse. So outside of understanding their learning styles, I know how to understand, what are their cultural practices? What are they allowed to eat? What are they not allowed to eat? What are some of the practices and customs that they should have practiced in? And am I supposed to be like responsible for that? Um, Allergies is another big one. Some people need medical support. All of that becomes like, wow, like that is a lot to kind of carry on your shoulder. And then these teachers have their outside families that they have to worry about too. And then you think, and then they're planning, and you're it's like, wow, that is a lot to kind of carry on your shoulders. So it's almost a good thing that we are allowing children the responsibility to take control of their learning. So it helps them find well, I have to think for myself with a lot of this, and that takes the pressure off of the adults, teachers, parents, government, society, and it gives children a lot of the that confidence to say, well, okay, well, you think about this with me now. It's not just on me to figure out how to solve this for you. So, like one really big question building off the last video would be kids who are, coming into age with exploring their sexuality. And I'm a teacher who may be secular, very postmodern. Maybe I had a few Muslim friends growing up, and now I have, a fairly maybe moderate Muslim population in my classroom, maybe in my school, and they're all exploring relationships with each other as boys and girls. Maybe they're wondering about girlfriend, boyfriends, and they see some of their peers who have families who wouldn't mind that exploration, but they're kind of conservative. They're kind of holding back. They're kind of wondering, like, are we allowed to? Are we not? Why are some families allowed to? They look like they're Muslim and we're not. So then the question might be, are parents going to be requesting that teachers monitor that? I would say that's a very kind of ambitious request because it's almost like I, as a teacher, is my role to kind of uphold the values of families. I mean, I can take them into consideration for sure because we want to have that open communication and say, I value what you value, and I want to make sure that the transition from school to home to society is one that's kind of not necessarily seamless because it can't be seamless, but it's somehow able to replicate itself or kind of you're able to kind of move from one place to another without feeling like you completely, you know, um, unfounded or ungrounded yourself because there's such a stark difference and you can't figure out which place you want to kind of stay in. This could also apply to some families who are maybe from lower income families and there's just a lot of strife within the family and kids actually like going to school because it's almost like a safe haven from whatever conflict might be at home. So all of these things when you think about them are a lot to grapple with. And I realize that even if my videos, some of them are longer than others, within about 45 minutes or less to about 50 minutes, some of them might have a lot of content that needs a lot of fleshing out. And I like on purpose, I only just skim the surface because I don't want to assume that there's ever going to be a right way for anything. And that is the postmodern idea. It's almost like every context is a case study on its own, and it's going to have its requisite kind of conclusion about how to address a problem. And that is what we know of Muhammad and what we know of what scholars do that, like in contemporary times right now with how to understand how to kind of problem solve for the communities or for, individual problems is that they have to understand, okay, well, what's your problem? What is your background? So like geographically, maybe like what country are you in? And then what's the kind of civic norm? And then why is this a problem for you? And then you kind of go from there. So if I was to say for uh, a school that I went to when I was in elementary school, for me, I was like, I didn't see myself as someone who was an outsider, but it was a very, very uh, Caucasian school. Like it was populated with, like there was a very, very small minority population. But in spite of that, I never felt normal. I never felt like I was out of the normal. Like I just felt like this is just me. My normal is that I look like I sometimes wear hijab, but I didn't feel like I was treated differently in any way. And it could be because I had siblings that went to school before me. So it was almost like, it was just, there was nothing outside of normal. But now I think with understanding how to integrate all the different maybe holidays or how to teach us, you know, a study of one culture without excluding another, it feels like, am I really going to be stuck in political correctness all the time? Like, how do I navigate this? So I don't know. This is kind of a question we can think about together to maybe help each other. But I think what I kind of just wanted to focus on is how, as parents or as adults, we want to think about this, and we have to be really, really, really lenient and kind of forgiving of ourselves, as well as try to be proactive and try to understand like what we can do to help people who maybe aren't aware of how tradition can kind of hold us back. Because they do try to be empathetic. Like I know my friends, they were always really empathetic and trying to understand, oh, okay, if you can't do this, that's fine. Very accommodating. But it gets to a point where because they're so overburdened with like so many responsibilities, if parents from traditional families continue to kind of make these requests and expect follow through, it becomes like, well, they're going to have to draw a boundary and say, like, if you want to let your child go to a private school, then maybe that's a better option for you because there's only so much that we can do from our end to uphold like a value that maybe is reserved or a little bit conservative, but we don't want it to seem like children who are exploring need to feel bad about themselves in any way. And it's a value that we want to kind of create across, like in a kind of global way, that we shouldn't kind of other the other person or another group because of, how they choose to kind of identify or explore how they are sexually or as a kind of gender contrast construct. So, can I leave it at that? It's a really big topic. I'd love to have kind of like an open discussion about this, but because it's a very context specific problem, but not a problem, it's just an issue that it's hard to say how would I address a question or somebody's feedback without understanding, how is this relevant to what your actual context is, and then how is that going to be relevant for other people without being like somewhat of an authority that can speak on such a broad level. For me, this is just my personal experience. It's quite limited. So not creating a standard, I think, is my goal. And then allowing other people in the audience or just in the world to kind of create communities or subgroups within their communities to kind of say, well, if this is our context and this is our struggle, how do we want to deal with it? And so they're almost creating their own goal and their own standard, and then how to meet it, and then how to continue to kind of evolve with that going forward.